the goats are the grazers, so they are the not grazers, but they're they would eat the bush,
right.
brush.
I mean, you can use some methods of just hand cutting the brush out, and then bringing in cattle. It is two issues: the coastal scrub succession and the partial degradation of the grasslands themselves.
Built up of
thatch in the grasslands. I mean, we measured thatch in the grasslands on the south slope, where this is more of a problem. That we had residual dry matter levels of almost 10 times what you would see in a nice native grassland that has a good distribution of wildflowers. And so as this thatch builds up, you've got greater risk of fire, more fuel loads, and you also have more of a propensity of invasive species to move in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has the HCP ever implemented proposals to thin out the coastal scrub, or we've never dealt with the coastal scrub?
Yeah, we've done it in a few isolated locations, sort of like a triage thing, where we knew the coastal scrub was going to wipe out a mission blue colony or a calliope area, but in the Saddle and also over at Hill West of Quarry, we did it. But I haven't been the habitat manager for 2 years now, and I'm not totally sure what they're doing at this point. But at this point, it's been very minimal. It was my experience. It was just sort of get in there, triage, make sure that you protect that habitat. But it's a process that's occurring in so many areas that it's just too difficult to control with the existing budget.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mayor, members of the council, I just want to remind you that Director Dave Holland is here, and the county is the habitat manager. So they may be able to answer better for you questions as to the current management activities on the mountain.
Okay, thank you, Robin. One of the pictures that you had was of Sears Point, and you said that the calliope is at Sears Point. And that was the first time, while reading your document, that I had learned that the calliope was at Sears Point. So much information that we've heard so far is that the majority of the populations are on San Bruno Mountain, and there's some other isolated places in the East Bay. This is up in Marin County.
That's right. The Fish and Wildlife Service has recognized the calliope at Sears Point and at in Solano County and in the East Bay Hills in Pleasanton. They've expanded the range of calliope really somewhat significantly in the last maybe 8-10 years in conservatively protecting this subspecies. And I have to say that it can be very difficult to tell this subspecies from the other subspecies of Spey area calliope, because it does overlap with Spey area calliope comstocki and Spey area calliope liliana in the North Bay. And so those boundaries are very fuzzy, and the service is, from what I understand, going to fund a genetic study to try to determine these boundaries better. But at this point, they are acting conservatively to protect these other areas.
Okay, but at this point, we don't know if the calliope that you would find on San Bruno Mountain is the exact same calliope that you would find at Sears Point.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. In your presentation, in your report on page 6, you talked about that the calliope does not have to make daily movements from the Northeast Ridge to other parts of San Bruno Mountain. And, during the last meeting, I was trying to get a handle on that. Do the two colonies, from the one that's at the Northeast Ridge and the other one that's on the South San Francisco side, do they interact with each other?
Right.
Trying to understand the flight patterns of the butterflies. You hear that they're strong flyers, but then in some areas they're non-existent, and it seems like a very short distance.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that there are limitations in those other areas that are more significant than just the calliope getting there. There is, these areas are small habitat areas. The calliope likes to have larger habitat areas, several hundred to thousands of viola plants on grassy hillsides associated with hilltops. And so this is predominantly where you find them. McLaren Park and this Ice House Hill, these other areas do not have a lot of viola. I've hiked around McLaren Park. There's not a lot of viola up there, despite what someone else had said in the earlier public hearing. And so what I think the best chance actually for the calliope to actually move to some of those areas is if we improve the habitat for them on the mountain. Their population will go up. Maybe they will fly and move to some of those areas if their population can get back to levels that we saw back in the early 80s.
Okay. All right, those are all the questions I have, Mr. Mayor.
Other question? Seppi?
I'm good, thanks.
Steve? Good. Sorry. No other questions? I have one.
Sure.
Actually, you answered quite a few of them. I just wanted to ask about the cattle grazing that you brought up in the use of fire. So if cattle was utilized up there, who would manage the cattle?
Right. Well, the county would. I mean, there's grazing leases that it's done actually quite inexpensively once the infrastructure is set up, which is the fencing and the stock ponds, et cetera. And that's how it's done at Sears Point. That's how it's done at Kirby Canyon. Once you get the infrastructure in place, then you can find ranchers that are interested in leasing the land and grazing their cattle. This is something that has to be monitored extensively so that the cattle are pulled off at the right time of year. But it works extremely well in these other locations because that's how it's done.
So it's kind of like having somebody up there 24/7 that's going to work the property or something, but they have to take them off at.
Right. Monitoring the stage of the vegetation is critical so that they get moved to other areas before they graze too hard.
Now, you talked about goats and sheep, that they wouldn't be as effective, mainly because they would eat everything, but they would be effective on the coastal scrub. And have you seen any programs like that are being utilized?
I have heard that if you, with goats, there has been some experiments done where they've grazed the goats on coastal scrub in the fall, which has worked very well to kill the coastal scrub because it's already, it's during the driest time of year, and so they're already stressed. So, and the goats really go after the broadleaves. That's a problem because our host plants are broadleaves and a lot of the nectar plants for the butterflies. So we don't want the goats, in the prime habitat areas. We would rather like to use them to sort of as a first stage.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And how about using fire to manage grasslands and stuff like that? Because there's, I guess, different points of view, or,
Yeah.
cool, I heard the term cool fire, and then fires that, just kind of go over it, and versus slow burning fires that maybe was considered the Allen Buckeye Canyon fire.
Right. Well, because we do have these excessive fuel loads in the grasslands and the scrub, when a fire does happen, it does, it's pretty catastrophic. It burns quite a bit. It burns hot. And so we don't want fires that burn like that. We want to be able to do controlled burns that, on a more sort of frequency enough that we don't have that buildup of fuel loads. And I would like to mention, too, that there's no way we can do controlled burns on this mountain the way it is right now. We would really have to graze some extensive fire buffers, 200 feet or something from around the residences, so that they could be secure that these fires would not get out of control.
Kind of like the Wax Myrtle Ravine fire.
Right.
It was a controlled burn. Yeah.
Right. That was a 4-acre controlled burn that burned 76 acres.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Patrick.